Hello beautiful people, welcome to the channel. The Witchy Goth here, hope you're doing well. Today's video I am going to be discussing the findings of the Supreme Court this past week around the definition of a woman and what this means for our transgender women. Now I want to make it very clear from the beginning that I am an ally of all transgender women. I have many transgender women friends, I love them all dearly, and I will fight with them for their rights. So any vitriol or hatred that comes along and is put down into the comments below, you'll probably be blocked from the channel. It's not necessary. If you want to speak about those things, go onto some other platform, perhaps Twitter, which seems to be rife with vitriolic and hateful, hurtful comments. So I'm going to play the findings of the Supreme Court. I hope you can hear this because it's very, very soft. And then I'm going to discuss my thoughts on what this means for women and transgender women. Now, I want to specify and make clear that I view transgender women as women.
Recognition certificate. By that I mean a person born male who now possesses a gender recognition certificate amending her gender to female.
Her gender to female. This would indicate that they do view a transgender woman as a she, a her.
And sex to be interpreted as including what I will refer to as certificated sex. The unanimous decision of this court is that the terms woman and sex in the Equality Act 2010 refer to a biological woman and biological sex. But we counsel against reading this judgment as a triumph of one or more groups in our society.
And that's true, because it's not a triumph for one or more groups in society. It is a ignorance of what transgender women experience.
At the expense of another, it is not. As I shall explain later in this hand-down speech, the Equality Act 2010 gives transgender people protection not only against discrimination through the protected characteristic of gender reassignment, but also against direct discrimination, indirect discrimination, and harassment in substance in their acquired
gender was the last word that he was going to use there. So within what he said there, he is saying that there should be no hatred and no discrimination. Now, this whole argument boils down to toilet use and J.K. Rowling and her horrendous hatred of trans women, a TERF. And I want to stress that a TERF is not a feminist, because feminists believe that trans women are female. A TERF is a fascist, a bigoted person who feels that they are above this, transgender women. I despair at the hatred that we have in this day and age around things that are different to what we view ourselves as. All my life I've been a goth. From the age of about 14, I started listening to sort of darker goth, well, it was new romantic, new wave music, punk music back then. And I've always dressed differently. My choice. And I have been singled out for those differences. And it doesn't bother me. And I know that many of my trans friends are strong and that they have gone through a lot of vitriol and they present themselves as they are because that's who they believe they are. And they are. It's not just what they believe they are, but they are that person. I mean, I'm also a witch, so there's persecution from that as well. From many people, especially Christians, that my beliefs are wrong and so on. I don't care what they think. I really don't. It doesn't bother me in the slightest. If it did, I would not go out dressed like a goth. I would not go to pagan festivals. I wouldn't be a high priestess. I wouldn't be a Reiki master. I wouldn't be a tarot reader because we're all woo-woo and out on, I'm a yoga instructor and all of these other things that I am. And it just defines who I am and creates me being different to the norm. So this whole decision itself, there is a sense to it. However, there is also no sense to it. So I'm just going to read through this article. I think this is from the BBC. Oh, no, it's from The Independent. Sorry. I've got a couple from the BBC as well here. So the UK Supreme Court handed down a judgment on Wednesday which has found that the terms woman and sex in the Equality Act refer to a biological woman and biological sex. Fair enough. With potential for long-lasting ramifications on how Britain treats its equalities policy. The dispute centres on whether or not somebody with a gender recognition certificate, a GRC, recognising their gender as female should be treated as a woman under the 2010 Equality Act. Now, before I go on, I don't know about you, but I've been going out to nightclubs since I was 14. And I have been in many nightclubs where there have been transgender women who have used the women's toilets. And you know what? Never have I had or experienced a problem. I grew up in Johannesburg, which in itself was a feat of, being goth, being different, and the Afrikaans nation at the time being very conservative. I stood out. I remember one day at school, it was really funny. We had a civvies day and we could go in our normal clothes. So I dressed up full goth and I had my hair spiked up and a long black coat and black leggings and a white shirt and my makeup done. And the Benoni City Times reporter who was there reporting, because it was also a sports day, I think, at the same time, came running over the rugby pitch towards me, and Mrs. Lubber, who I think was the deputy headmistress at the time, I think it was Mrs. Lubber, said, no, you can't interview her. No. And I just thought it was hilarious because obviously this difference stands out. But really, look around you. Look at transgender women today. So many of them look more like women than women. I look at my trans friends and they look fabulous. They definitely have bigger boobs than I do, especially now that I've lost so much weight. And they are the nicest, kindest, wonderful people. I was at a Garbage concert last year and I met a wonderful lady. She was sat in front of me and I thought, I really want to speak to this person. And eventually she turned around and we got chatting and we're now friends. And I'm actually going to be doing a trans series over the summer where I talk to trans women and find out their experiences of being trans and how they transitioned into that, how they knew and understood that they were not a boy. They didn't recognise as male. But that's for the future. I have to wait until after I've finished my final assignment for my degree. Anyway, so to me, having gone into toilets where there have been many, many transgender women, I have never experienced anything bad in any way, shape or form. What I have experienced are men going into women's toilets and causing trouble and being aggressive. Now, a lot of this is going to create a lot of contention. This is not just about women's toilets, it's also about changing rooms and so on. Women have fought for safe spaces. Yes, I absolutely agree with that 100%. Since the dawn of time, women have wanted safe spaces. But so do trans women, and so do trans men. So where does this leave trans men? Because biologically, at birth, they were born female. So must a trans man now use the female toilets? And trans men, often very, very masculine, beards and so on, built. How would a woman, an actual biological born woman, tell apart a trans man from a man? A trans woman having to use a man's toilet is going to suffer more harassment and potential hurt and harm and damage. Many trans women are not going to be going to toilets, therefore causing problems to themselves physically. There is going to be a fear for trans women. Now, I was watching some of the footage of the celebrations that the Scottish women they're the ones that took this to court, were partaking in. And I did notice that there were a couple of lesbian women there who looked very masculine. Could they now be forced to show their gender identity? Now, there was an article from the Transport Police on trains that anyone who is seen as a woman or a trans woman is going to be searched by a male officer. So, me, for example, I'm 6 foot tall. I have been called a trans woman before. I am not, I'm cisgendered. It doesn't bother me that I am called trans. I really don't care. Like I said, I've been different my whole life, so I don't care. But do I want to strip down so a man can perv at my body? We already know that in the police force in the UK, there is so much misogyny and hatred towards women. So if I don't carry my birth certificate with me, how am I going to prove that I'm a woman? This is despicable, and it creates more of a difficult situation, terrifying situation, not just for trans women, but for women as a whole. So the ruling follows a series of legal challenges brought by the campaign group for Women Scotland, FWS, backed by Harry Potter author J.K. Rowling, over the definition of a woman. Now, this argument's been going on in Parliament for a while now as well, with the Labour Party not wanting to define this definition. Some definitions are ambiguous by nature, and perhaps they should remain so. However, this is just hate. It's just hatred. It's demonizing a minority group that we look back in history and we see how the right wing has scapegoated minority groups, from trans women, gay men and women, from cultures that were not understood, the Romanis, the Gypsies, the Travellers, the Jewish people, and so on, that the Nazis, persecuted in the 30s and 40s. And this is the start of it all over again. Where does it go from here? How much hatred should there be, or will there be, from this ruling? So what does this ruling mean? In the ruling, justices at the UK's highest court unanimously ruled in FWS's favour and ruled that woman inequality law refers to biological women. But how does that equality law affect trans women? The terms woman and sex in the Equality Act 2010 refer to a biological woman and biological sex. The justices later said that if sex did not only mean biological sex in the Equality Act, providers of single-sex spaces, including changing rooms, homeless hostels and medical services, would face practical difficulties. Now, this has an effect, a rolling effect on other areas within the United Kingdom, and there's a lot of discussion around this, a lot of worry around this, and what this could do to women and trans women, and how it could affect both rights. So there are going to be problems from this. There are today around the UK in many cities marches and protests for transgender rights. Unfortunately, I was not able to attend to my local one in Sheffield. But this whole thing is just despicable. It really is. I despair. I do despair at where this is going to end. So where does a trans woman go to change if she's going to gym or to shower? Where does a trans man go to change and go to shower? Why is this only picking on trans women and not trans men? Now, I'm not saying that there is a difference between the two. You know, if you have gender identity that you feel you are a woman when you were born a man, you should be able to have that ability to change. I mean, we allow people to have tattoos, people have weird hairstyles, people do body modification, and we may not all of us may be comfortable with that, but that is their choice, the same as is a transgender woman becoming a woman. So there are going to be problems. We look at hospitals, hospital wards. Where are transgender women going to be placed? In the men's ward. Prisons. You know, this is terrifying. Trans women already take so much hatred and vitriol from communities at large that this is now going to create even more hatred towards them. And my heart goes out to every single one of you who feels that you are going to be persecuted for this. And I know that there are a lot of you out there that are strong and will just move forward in your strength as you always have. It is just, to me, the law needs to reach further and it needs to be broadened. Now, when you look at local cafes, you know, you go for a coffee, a lot of them, the toilets are unisex. They have one toilet for both men, women and children. So how's that going to work? Even at my local Costa Coffee, there are 2 toilets and men and women and children all use them. It frustrates me in the way that perhaps older generations, not all, view this as a problem, whereas younger generations, especially Gen X onwards, we look at this and we go, well, what's the difference? And I get told by women who claim to be feminists that, oh, you should be, if you were a feminist, you would want to protect these spaces. And yes, I do, from men. In my experience, men have been the ones that have entered women's spaces to spy, perv, whatever. I have never experienced any trans women doing that. In fact, most of the trans women that I've met in ladies' toilets have been wonderful. Perhaps we've shared makeup tips, or where do we get our shoes from, because I've got big feet, because I'm 6 foot tall. So, you know, all of these things. And it saddens me that some people are so narrow-minded and so closed-minded. So this is going to have a lot of a despicable effect on trans women. And one of the activists, Jane Fay, told the BBC the judgment felt like a physical body blow, and that it was as if trans people were being excluded from society. Today we're feeling very alone, she said. What does this mean? Can I use this loo? Can I do that? Can I do the other? In contrast, the women's groups who fought the case feel vindicated and jubilant. I don't understand why. We, as feminists, embrace our trans allies because they fight for the same rights that we do. We fight for equality. Until there is equality for all women, there can never be equality. And I said that to somebody today, because so often on my channel, people in comments come along and say, yeah, but you women have equality. No, we don't. And I want to stress that this is not just women in the West. This is women all around the world who are forced into marriages at the age of 12, who are sex trafficked, who are forced to have FGM. These things that happen to women affect all of us. And before anybody comes along and says, but, you know, being trans is a mental illness, it isn't. I'm studying psychology at the moment. It is not a mental illness. So I really hope that trans women are able to move forward and recognise that not all women, in fact, the vast majority of us, are not these despicable, fascistic, bigoted women, that we welcome you into our gender and we will fight for you. If you've enjoyed the video, please click the like button. Please subscribe to the channel. I hope to see you next time. Blessed be.